So I was arrested on the air. It made the television news. I was the #1 DJ in Santa Barbara, made the news, made the newspaper. The first couple days in jail, after I was done blaming everyone else and realized that I had put myself in there, is when my life really changed. I started attending AA meetings inside the jail. I knew I wasn't getting out for a little while. I met my sponsor in the jail, and in January, I was eligible for work furlough, where I could leave during the day, but I had to turn myself back into the jail every night to stay at the jail. But I had to have a job, and they wouldn't let me have a job as a radio announcer, and that's what my craft was. So one of the most humbling experiences, John, that's ever happened to me is one of my old bosses reached out and he says, "What can I do?" I said, "David," I said, "I need a job." His name's David Perry. He's a very special person to me. He said, "Rick," he says, "I don't have one, but I'll create one." So I went from being the #1 DJ to actually answering the phones and making phone calls for the DJs who were #2 and #3. They are the ones who had replaced me when I left that station to launch this. It was the most humbling job. I had a friend drop a bicycle off at the jail, so I rode a bike down to work. I would get there, I would answer phones. I rode the bike back up the hill to turn myself in every day. And in February, I was eligible for sheriff's parole because I had done well. There was a crowding issue. They wanted to release some stuff. I wasn't a threat to them, and they allowed me the opportunity to register and try to qualify for sheriff's parole. It ended up happening, so I was released February. And the first call I made was to my AA sponsor. I said, "Rodney," I said, everybody thought I'd be calling a girl. You've been in jail for 4 months, you're calling a girl. No, I called my sponsor. He invited me to his home for a home-cooked meal with his wife and his 2 daughters. And he had reached out. He said, "Hey, you played soccer growing up, right?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, Lindsay's team needs a coach. They've run off 3 coaches. They're in last place. It's only 3 games. He said they call themselves the Miss Americas. That's what they think about themselves." They were 12 and 13-year-old little girls. And what they didn't realize is that I needed the Miss Americas to build my own self-esteem as much as the Miss Americas needed Rick. What I did not realize was that this was God preparing me for something much bigger. So as I get with the Miss Americas, we clicked for whatever reason. We went from last place to 3rd place, ended up making the tournament. We spent all summer together. And then I was invited to coach a girls' high school soccer team who'd never had a winning season. I took the job. We had a winning season the first year. I learned, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I speak teenage female. I learned the difference between a 13 and an 18-year-old female is about 20 years. It's not 5 years. There is no middle ground with girls. It's either the lowest of the lows, the highest of the highs. And what that was God preparing me for Taylor Swift, because there was going to be a time when I was going to get the opportunity to work with Taylor and help set the foundation that would go on and end up changing millions of people's lives by having the ability to help mold her early on in her career and work with her. And that's kind of where we are now. I met my wife. I had kids. I know we're talking about the father effect here, but ultimately I met my wife at a meeting. She's also sober. We ended up having children. I have a 14-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter who are little rock stars, and they're great kids. And the nervousness that I felt was, how do I be a dad when I never really grew up with a dad? How do I know how to do that? So once again, let me let you in here, because as you can tell, I can talk for a long time. So
Dude,
jump in anytime, John.
I love it, brother. I love it. What a stinking story, bro.
Everybody's like, "Dude, that's like a movie." I'm like, "We'll call it From the Ghetto to Music Row." There's the title.
Yeah, you definitely got a few books in you, I think.
I do.
So before we because obviously I do want to get to the Taylor Swift story and how that all came about. But before we get there, so one of the things with the addiction piece, and when we interviewed John Eldridge for the film, he made me understand and realize so much. And one of the things that he talked about, he said, John, so much of the time we want to pour medication. We want to medicate this addiction, right? And he talks about it, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, we can continue to medicate the addiction all we want.
Right.
But until we get to the root of why you're addicted? What is the root cause of that? Why are you medicating? We're
Right.
going to continue to be addicts for the rest of our lives.
You're absolutely correct.
And so was there something there that you came to understand or have come to understand of why you were doing that? Is there a root there that
No,
came to
I
the
just,
forefront?
for me, it was if alcohol is the problem and I've eliminated that. And so, like I said, I didn't want to drink anymore because I felt that one day I would get so drunk, someone might offer me cocaine and I could do cocaine again. So I never felt that I had a drinking problem. But for someone who gets 3 DUIs in a month, that's a problem. Normal people don't decide to get behind the wheel of a car after they've been drinking. Someone with a problem does. So once I came to realize that, and then after I eliminated alcohol, I eliminated drugs, but I was still getting arrested. Maybe it's me who's the problem. At some point you've got to take a look at yourself. I always tell people, if you meet 3 assholes in a day, it's probably you, because there's just something that goes on that it wasn't until I realized that unless I changed how I thought, unless I changed how I treated people, unless I changed internally, took that internal change. That's why I'm so involved with Celebrate Recovery. It's a 12-step program based on the Bible principles. I'm also involved with another Bible-based recovery program called Regeneration. I felt that for me, I needed more God in my life. I needed, you go to AA meetings and there's people that are atheists and they'll say, use the doorknob as your higher power. It's like, no, my higher power is Jesus Christ. If that offends people, I apologize. When I tell my story, I always tell them, I'm not here to push God on anyone. He just played a role in my story, and that's kind of how I look at things. But until, the person who sees the addict doesn't see them as someone who has a fatal disease. It is a disease that will kill you.
Absolutely.
And you don't continue to feed that disease with what's causing the problem in the first place. Now, let me say this. There are some chemical imbalances. There are some mental disorders that you do need medication in order to make you right. So I'm not anti-opposed. Anything you take, which is, in my opinion, a mind-altering substance, if you're trying to take something to escape reality, that's a drug that's have an issue. If you have to take something to function every day, that's completely different. I'm not a doctor. A doctor can prescribe that. But right now, I think sometimes, like with kids, these doctors are prescribing, opiates at a rate that's just crazy. And these kids are now taking drugs to learn how to study. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So that's a whole nother podcast, by the way, and a whole
Yeah.
nother episode.
Yeah. I had a real issue with, here was my thing. I was the abandonment with my father, right? Is the abandonment. It was like, but my thing was, if I could live in that victimhood, the victim mentality, I could justify it, rationalize it in every way imaginable. And it
Yep.
was like, I was medicating this wound I had, and I could blame my dad for everything. And as addicts, we're really good at blaming other people, never taking responsibility for ourselves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not us, it's them.